and Mary Murphy for inviting me on here. I feel really privileged to be able to do so. I made a quick little PowerPoint because I had some questions that was sent to me from Mary Murphy and Linda of topics that would be great to address, and I just figured it'd be easier to have the visual medium. But I'm going to share my screen so we can all see it. I know the Zoom language we've all heard a million times here. And then I have a little presentation. Just someone give me like a thumbs up if you can see it. A quick little, nice. Okay. So this is just really short. I just want to address these three questions. So just what I'm going to go through here is an introduction to myself as well as my employer, the Michigan AFL-CIO. I want to talk about organized labor in 2022, union busting and obstacles we're facing, recent and active strikes going on, and then we'll do questions at the very end, I guess, so we can skip that part for me. But so to start, whoops, I already skipped one. Who I am, my name is Max Lewis. I am the Regional Field Director for the Michigan AFL-CIO, and I am our Metro Detroit lead. So that means I cover all of Oakland, Macomb, and Wayne counties. But I have also been working full-time in Democratic and progressive campaigns since 2018. I compiled a few random photos of some of my previous gigs, including I worked for a labor-affiliated super PAC called For a Future. I was down in Georgia, Atlanta, working with Stacey Abrams's organization, the New Georgia Project, with Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff's campaigns. That was a lot of fun. I worked for Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin and ran her campaign for a little bit. And then here's one at the bottom right of me and my coworker, Carly Rose, with the Michigan AFL-CIO. And what I'm just now realizing, Beck, is you right next to me, taken from the Comrades and Coffee rally. I literally had no idea until just now. I pulled that from the Comrades and Coffee website. Carly and I thought it was funny that we made it in. So those are some highlights for what I've been doing, and can answer questions if people have about that later or off chat. Just a quick touch on the Michigan AFL-CIO. We are the affiliation we have over 40 plus affiliated unions in the state. We have 18 local labor bodies. We represent 1 million active and retired members. And as the regional field director for Southeast Michigan, my main job, it can be summarized as mobilizing across Oakland, Macomb, and Wayne counties our 400 plus locals in order to help pro-labor candidates win elections and pass pro-labor policies. And so if you know anyone here who is in a major union in the state of Michigan, there's a good chance you see that union logo right here on the slide, although it's not all of them, it's most of them though. First, I just want to do a super quick disclaimer when talking about labor. Just a heads up, the word labor is not a monolith. It's a buzzword that we say a lot, but talking about labor unions can lead to a lot of generalization sometimes. Different unions face individual challenges and they can have a vast range of priorities. So I just wanted to give a quick heads up, considering all the different situations, like an employer union relationship being different for different organizations, specific geographic or state-based legislation that changes priorities, individual officers or leadership of a certain local speaking on behalf of something that maybe is not necessarily true for other members, and so much more can cause these little nuance and differences. So I say this just to be cautious when you hear language of people saying like, oh, unions like candidate like X or whatever, or oh, all workers don't like this stance. There can be a lot more nuance, and I include myself in that as well. I do not claim to be speaking on behalf of all organized labor or unions or my own president or anything like that. But the first question asked to address organized labor in 2022. Let's start with some good news. There's been a lot of headlines about organized labor and union strong movements in the state as well as the country. Just some positive trends that are great to highlight. Percentage of union members who are women has steadily increased. We're currently at 47.1% nationwide. But in 1984, that was only 33.5%. This also is true for labor leadership, has increased the percentage that are women. And the national AFL-CIO president for the first time is a woman, President Liz Schuler. She's from Oregon, but she has spoken on this issue or on the success a lot, and it's some really incredible stuff. Also, Gallup polls has shown increased approval rating for labor unions since 1985. That's gone up, and it's currently at a high of 68%. And then the Biden-Harris administration has also just shown historic support for organized labor. They've talked about it a lot. They've done a lot of recommendations for the National Labor Review Board, and a lot of details I won't get into right now, but I'm happy to answer questions on later. So these are some good news about labor. There are some bad news. It can be summarized, I think, with this chart. It says a lot, which is union membership has steadily fallen in the United States. We are currently only at 10% of full-time employees in the country are in a union. And just in the year 1985, that was doubled to 20%. And I believe in the 50s, it was like 34 or 5% at its peak. So membership has gone down, which is specifically in the private sector, which is not good. And yeah, so that has been a decreasing trend since the 1950s. Another roadblock organized labor is facing is this thing called the PRO Act. It's actually the inspiration behind my Zoom background. Oh my gosh, I'm struggling. It's over here. But the PRO Act is a bill that would do so much to update current labor law. It would bolster protections for workers' rights to organize. It does a lot of things that just bring more power to workers and more power to unions and less negative influence from corporations. And unfortunately, this PRO Act, despite passing the US House a half a dozen times, it has, for all intents and purposes, hit a brick wall in the US Senate. It does not appear to possible to pass in the world of a filibuster dominated Senate, even though, Senator like Joe Manchin, for example, supports it, but Senator Kristen Sinema does not. And it's just unfortunately something that we were really hoping could come out of this administration. It does not seem to be the case, at least until after 2022. Also, some bad news is with the rise of high profile unionization efforts, major companies, corporations are running heavily funded anti-union disinformation campaigns to intimidate workers and suppress their right to organize. And we'll get into a little bit of that right now. Talking about union busting, the second point that I was asked to mention, I heard a quote one time that I think really tells a whole tale, which is deceive, delay, confuse, intimidate. Those are the major tools, some of the major tools in a corporation's toolbox. And we have seen these deceive, delay, confuse, intimidate all over, like in Buffalo Starbucks, the Bessemer Amazon plant, or Amazon warehouse, excuse me. And even successful strikes, they all have to overcome these obstacles. And there's some basic strategy behind this that companies do as well. For example, they hire union busting firms to try to create this distance between themselves and this anti-worker effort of their own employees. And then the company will concede a very small ask of what the union is fighting for, but then for like 95% of what the unions want, they will not budge and they will not be cooperative. There's some examples of this. For example, the ACLU of Kansas, which is an organization, ACLU, that I'm sure we all think pretty highly of. They hired this really bad union busting firm. I have the name right here. I always pronounce wrong. Ogletree Deacons, which is a terrible firm. They also represented racist sheriff of Arizona, Joe Arpaio. So the ACLU hired these people against their own employees. The REI president did an interview on the official REI podcast, which I had no idea even existed until I heard about this interview, in which President Eric Artz he introduced himself with all these very progressive talking points he went through. He did a land acknowledgement. He talked about his preferred pronouns. He used a lot of the progressive buzzwords and correct talking points that people like to hear, and then just immediately pivoted into these anti-union, really terrible capitalistic talking points that sort of just shows that he was doing this virtue signaling that, oh, we are this progressive company, that we are on your side and have these values. But then when push came to shove, he immediately started talking about falsehoods surrounding unions and their workers. And then another major barrier and tool with the union busting, corporate obstacles, is that there are really no major federal reporting requirements when it comes to union busting. So finding a lot of reliable data and tools on this is pretty difficult. Like, we can go through a lot in more tedious detail, the steps needed to form a union, then we can look at the steps taken by a corporation against that union. A lot of that is done behind closed doors, and we only have to learn about it after the fact. So things like expenditures or who's hiring what firms, these are all things that corporations can hide in the darkness and do some dirty tricks with. Just for a heads up too, this was an anti-union talking point, like little bulletin that was posted in REIs all across the country after the REI in Manhattan, New York, workers voted to unionize, and it's just filled with all this disinformation and trying to like make sort of these threats that unions are going to represent for employees. And I actually think it's really funny. I think the way that some corporations talk about unionization efforts is very similar to very right-wing people talk about Democratic or like Democratic socialist candidates by saying, oh, they want this big government that you can't say no to, and that government is taking away your choice. That's a very much the same language that corporations say, oh, this union, they're going to make you become a member whether you like it or not, and you don't have as many freedoms as you would with just your employer. But it's a lot of misinformation and it's dirty and we don't like it. Lastly, I just wanted to touch on some recent strikes and hope. And for everything I said, there's so much more that can go into all of this. I'm really trying to do as much bullet point stuff as possible. But despite the tremendous roadblocks, there is hope for organized labor in 2022 and beyond. For example, the John Deere and Kellogg strikes were extremely successful, and they gathered significant media attention that otherwise a lot of worker organized labor issues don't really get, including cracking into things like daytime cable news, which is just these days, that's so hard to get them to talk about anything that's not, the political happenings in the White House or surrounding whatever the hot topic cultural issue is. Over 100 Starbucks locations have filed for union elections, including several in Michigan. I can get you all that list if you want. Michigan's newly recreational cannabis industry has created this huge surge of potential union membership, and is actually kind of an interesting situation with unions wanting to fight over who gets the cannabis workers. It's kind of a developing situation, but that is sort of could represent a new wave of union growth as well in a growing industry. And then I wanted to touch on something that I will not talk about too much because Beck can talk about it much more. But of course, the Great Lakes Coffee Roaster workers in Detroit voted to unionize in partnership with Unite Here Local 24 and the Michigan AFL-CIO. Comrades in Coffee is striking in their union until the union is recognized by management. But I'm not going to talk too much about that because Becky will be able to talk about it better. And so, yeah, that's me. Those are, I'm not going to get into questions right now because I know we're going to do that later, but I can post my contact information in chat as well. All those, I kind of felt like I sped through that, but I'm happy to answer any more questions. Oop, I just see that I got spotlighted. Oh, wow. So I don't know how you want to do this, Linda. You tell me.
Linda, you're muted. You have to unmute.
Linda, I think you are muted.
Linda, you're muted. You need to unmute.
Oh, I see what
There
I
you
was.
go.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Sorry. I think that was great. Thank you. And Max, and then, as I said, we're going to move on to the next speaker and then we'll hold the question. So keep your thoughts, please. Okay, so next is Beck. Beck, would you like to go ahead and give us your spiel?
Hi, so my name's Beck. Thank you for having me here to speak. So I am one of the striking baristas at Great Lakes Coffee. We're calling ourselves Comrades in Coffee while we work with Unite Here. We have been on strike for, it'll be 30 days tomorrow. And this began early January, late December. Great Lakes Company as a whole has been exploiting their workers since before I've worked there. I've been there for 9 months. And I know that since they opened their doors, it's just been an unsafe environment to work in. So it was all kind of like a boiling point that brought us here. At the beginning of January, we started having workers test positive for COVID. At first, it was just one worker and nobody really thought a big deal about it. Myself and a coworker sat our manager down to kind of like figure out how we can prevent the spread of it. We asked them for PPE, like masks, hand sanitizer, allowing us time off to go get tested, all of that stuff. And it was like a 2-hour long discussion that he just kind of like brushed us to the side of. And then of course, following that, nearly everybody got COVID. So 2 weeks into that, it was me and 4 other baristas left to run the cafe. I don't know, for people who haven't been to the Midtown location, it's like a very busy intersection on Woodward. And there's so many customers in and out every day. So typically you have 4 people working up front, 2 in the kitchen, multiple shift changes throughout the day. But the last week that we were open, it was 4 or 5 of us working open to close every day, nonstop. The managers had tested positive, so they were nowhere to be found. They weren't replying to our texts, anything like that. And I was in school at the time. A lot of my coworkers were in school at the time. So everything was being put on the back burner because we wanted to look out for each other until I think it was, I wrote it down. January 6th was our last day working. At that point, we were like extremely burnt out. There's no communication with managers. One of my coworkers was extremely stressed out. She's a pre-med student, like had no time to do anything. And so I asked her if she wanted to come into work the next day, or we could not come in and demand that we're not coming in. This is an unsafe working environment. And at that point, everybody kind of fell in line, and all of the people that could work agreed they didn't want to come in. So we sent an email to the owners stating that we would not be returning to work the next day. We want to get tested for COVID because we had all been exposed. And they replied to us at 11 p.m. at night, telling us we had an hour to reply and to be at work the next day, Friday, or else that would be our resignation. So we all kind of got on the phone and like figured out legally what our rights were, even though none of us had any idea. And we put together another email and sent it to them, which led to them not replying to us for 2 days. So we sent them another email, really fed up at that point, stating that we would not be returning to work until we had this whole new list of demands. Minimum wage of $15 an hour. Majority of the baristas get paid $10 an hour, and they expect us to live on our tips, which are not reliable at any time. We wanted health insurance. We wanted COVID protocols, safe working environment, non-discriminatory hiring workplace. And to that email, they just completely ignored it and told us to be at work on Monday, which of course we didn't go. So then like a week and a half, 2 weeks went by. We were sending them more emails, trying to get them to respond to us, and they were not reaching out. So we went to Unite Here, and we've been working with them ever since. There's immediate contact with them. They're amazing. They welcome us in, and they all have been so great. We got the entire Midtown location to sign union cards, as well as workers in the Rivertown location and Royal Oak location, which is majority of the company, really. So since then, we have been out picketing the locations every morning. We have been having rallies on the weekends. We've been doing phone banking, visiting stores, asking them to not sell Great Lakes coffee. It's been a lot of work nonstop to get to this point, but like I said, tomorrow's going to be 30 days. With today, we filed for our election. We figured that we would take that into our hands instead of the employers filing it for us. So we're very excited about that. They have tried some union busting techniques whenever they have rarely contacted us. Just like the typical trying to like take us apart as individuals. The union can't give you this, we can give you this, just talk with us. Talking about like the American dream a lot and how like we're a family, all of that stuff, which is not working clearly. But yeah, that's pretty much it. We do have an upcoming rally this Sunday. It's going to be at the Midtown location. We're going to have current employees speaking, past employees speaking, some other Detroit organizations. We will be unveiling our own espresso machine. So we're going to have our own little like pop-up Comrade and Coffee Cafe. This will be very fun. And then yeah, picketing every day. If anybody ever wants to come out to the picket line is always welcome. But that's pretty much the backstory of Comrades and Coffee. Yes.
That's great.
Thank you.
That's a great overview. Thank you. I think we all have some questions, but we're going to hold them. Okay, next up is Peter.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for the invitation. I recognize a fair number of faces in the meeting, some of whom I walked the picket line for the Detroit newspaper strikers some 25 years ago. When I think about the current moment in labor activism, I think about the last 50 years, but I especially think about the last 15 years. Depending on time, maybe I'll get to the 50 years perspective, but in terms of the last 15 years, I think of basically the 2008 Great Recession and how we've seen that unfold over the last, I guess it would be 13 or 14 years at this point, and its impact on the US in terms of politics and working people. I use it as a timeline to think about, you know, the first Obama administration, to think about things like Black Lives Matter in that period, to think about Occupy coming out of that, to think about the upsurge around climate change and all the ferment that's been going on, you know, over these last 10 to 15 years. I think it sort of forged or created a generation that's now anywhere from 18 to 40 that, you know, doesn't live in the same world that many of us grew up in or spent most of our adult lives in terms of our working experience. So I think that ferment has definitely affected how people see themselves in the world and what kind of fights over needs that they're willing to confront or the challenges that they face. One important event that happened in the last 10 years in 2012 is the Chicago Teachers Union elected a reform caucus that then led the Chicago teachers in a very significant strike in 2012. And that's had reverberations throughout education since then, especially among teachers, and led to things like the West Virginia strike in 2018. And there was also one in Arizona and Kentucky. There's been a real ferment in terms of what's going on in teaching, but as folks also probably know from the headlines, the kind of pushback that the teachers are getting politically and how they're being undermined in terms of, you know, how they're perceived in terms of their roles in our society. But I think in this crowd, we all know how essential teachers are to our world and the importance that teachers play in our lives. What was significant about the 2012 Chicago teachers strike was not just that it was run by a different sort of reform caucus union leadership, but it had a perspective beyond the bread and butter issues of wages, pensions, things like that. Now, those are all important. They're important to working people. But this leadership understood the necessity for involving parents, students, and other community activists in discussing and debating and working around the issues that were affecting education. And I think that planted some very important seeds for the labor movement going forward, and was, at least has been an inspiration to the part of the labor movement that I've been involved in over the years. So I think that's an important marker as we find ourselves in 2022, because I think issues around teachers and education are not going away. Right now, the Minneapolis teachers are out on strike and have been for, I think this is their 6th day, around similar issues to what we faced in Chicago. And so, you know, that's a strike of thousands. So, you know, that's going to be very significant in Minnesota and could reverberate throughout the country. I think we find ourselves in 2022, 2 years into COVID, and we know the importance of essential workers, teachers, nurses, and all the workers that have really been the backbone of how the economy has continued to function over the last 2 years. And it's not the stockbrokers, it's not the hedge fund managers, it's not even Jeff Bezos, although those are the people that have been making tons of money during COVID and prior to COVID. And the sense that people have, I think working people have, that they're not getting, they and we are not getting our fair share, while, you know, the 1/10 of 1% is running off with just tons and tons and tons, billions and billions and billions of dollars. That has to be addressed. So let's fast forward to 2022. I think in the last year or two, we've learned lessons. Max pointed out the Kellogg strike, the John Deere strike. I don't know, I think I'll have some questions for him about that in terms of the success. I think it's true that it was a success in terms of getting more media attention, and we're certainly seeing more media attention with Starbucks and other things, but I see those still as a good step forward in terms of members stepping up and being willing to fight around their contracts and advocate for themselves. But this is where I get the 50-year sort of point. These are now the children of 50 years of concessions and cooperation by the labor establishment with capital. And that has not worked for us for 50 years. That approach, that strategy. We're also seeing in 2022 sort of the children of a labor establishment which is more or less tailed or tied itself to the Democratic Party and its perspectives on what's good for America and, you know, what can be done. Frankly, we haven't had one piece of major labor legislation since OSHA, which, if I remember right, was around 1970 and done under the Nixon administration. So while it's true we have to look for all the allies that we can get, these allies haven't necessarily served working people with. I'm very excited about the opportunities of this moment in 2022 in terms of things that are percolating or fermenting or coming together, like Starbucks and Comrades in Coffee with Great Lakes Coffee and things like that, the efforts around John Deere and Kellogg and other places. I'm not confident that our current labor establishment or the current political leadership that we look to sort of meet our needs as working people really have much of a sense or want to fight. I think this is reflected in what kind of support Bernie Sanders, for example, got from the Democratic Party establishment, or what I would call the corporate Democrats. They did everything in their power to make, as far as I'm concerned, Bernie had a very good program, though a very limited sort of social democratic program, which would be a great step forward relative to what we've been getting, but still is not, it's the bare minimum of what we need in terms of what our real challenges, contradictions, et cetera, that we face in 2022 in terms of this world. So everybody talks about Amazon these days, and I certainly want to take on Amazon, but Amazon is a billion-dollar corporation. Our labor establishment at best is $1 million, at least in its coffers and its treasury. It's $1 million operation. But if we're going to take on something like Amazon, it's going to need a far more sort of grassroots organized approach and understanding which side Amazon is on, and not just Jeff Bezos, but what Jeff Bezos and Amazon represent in terms of how our economy functions and what kind of economy we truly need in terms of what we're facing with climate change and everything else. And the two don't match. An Amazon economy and what we need in terms of climate change do not match. So in order to face up to that means facing up to who are we as workers and who are we up against? And that's one thing that the labor establishment, at least over the last 50 years, has not been willing to recognize. The labor union establishment has basically tied its future or our futures to, as capital goes, so go we, and we'll be happy to pick up the crumbs if it's the crumbs that ultimately are offered. So I'll stop there. I think I'm probably at my 10-minute mark and look forward to the discussion.
Okay, thank you to all of you. That's been a good overview. Is there anything that you want to respond to each other? Max, did you want to respond to some of the things that Peter just said?
I think, yeah, there's a lot to be said. I mean, I certainly don't, when I was talking about the calls for optimism, I certainly don't think I painted a picture of everything as solved and gravy and roses now. I certainly think the obstacles are very real. And, I think the number one indicator of that is just membership has continued to decrease. But I'm definitely open to questions. I think that might be best.
All right, so we have, oh, I'm sorry, you all needed to respond. Go
Pardon
ahead.
me?
Go ahead, Peter or Beck, to any responses to each other. I jumped in before I was supposed to.
Well, I think Beck, do you have any response?
No, I don't have a response. I was gonna say this is all like very new to me, so it's just really great to hear what everybody has to say. And I'm excited for the discussion.
Okay. And
All right.
and Peter, I think, Peter, are you okay? Then should we go on to questions? Or do you have any other response?
Yeah, I may have a question. I may have a question for Max later in the discussion, but let's see how things go.
Okay, well, then let's go ahead, Melanie.
All right, let's see. So Steve Gold says he's been using Labor Lab's union busting tracker to access reports made to the U.S. Department of Labor. These reports tell what union busting corporations have been hired by what employers. Do you know of other or better websites that we should know about?
I can start. I know that is one that our national team uses as well. I don't know of a better one offhand. I think there's such limited information out there that they consider the gold standard.
Okay. Charles Kessenberg? Chuck, do you have
Yes,
a
sir.
question?
You have to unmute. Oh, there you go. Chuck, unmute yourself.
Ryan here. Okay, there I am, right?
Yep.
Hey, I've got two, if you don't mind. The first one, well, of course, I want to qualify and say that I'm much in favor of unions. Having worked for 40 years, I've been salaried, but I am grateful and always have been for knowing that the reason I got holidays off and weekends was because of the union. And even though I wasn't a member of the union, halfway through my employment, I did try to get the AFL-CIO in, I will tell you, but we were not successful in our election. Management, played the family card. Anyway, working here in the Motor City, I'm familiar with many people that have been in the UAW, and they're a bit disappointed, as you know, because of the scandals and everything that's happened here in Detroit, especially with the UAW and its abuse of money and pay for play kind of thing. And I wondered what is the union doing? Because I know there's a lot of feeling of hopelessness, and then I hear ex-employees of General Motors saying, yeah, my union hall was a mess, usually it was a garbage, and they never they never really took care of us, and all this is coming out now. And I was just wondering, what are you all doing, to counter that, and make sure that doesn't happen again, would be my first question. And then the second question is, how do you handle the thing, as we know, our society so nowadays seems to be so polarized and playing to the polarities that, you go, well, I don't want to belong to the union because I may not agree with their advocacy for certain cultural issues. And I was wondering, so basically they might be related. I was wondering, how are you dealing with those two very, the issues that are very much in conversation nowadays?
Is there somebody you would like to answer first?
No, anybody, it's open to anybody. Anybody care to address those? So I didn't mean it to be hostile. I just, I was very curious, and what you're doing, or if you feel they're not really a problem in your recruiting or whatever. But like I say, I happen to know a lot of people in the auto industry who are very disappointed in what has happened at the UAW.
Okay, who would like to
Max.
answer, Max?
Max, I can take a stab at the UAW if you want me to give a try, and then you can, it's up to you. And then maybe you take on the,
Yeah, I'm not going to comment too much on the UAW. I kind of reject the premise of what you said a little bit. I do think that people feel a type of way that they feel, and I'm not trying to invalidate their feelings. I don't agree with the UAW is out of order or anything like that. But yeah, Peter, why don't you go for it?
well, right now, unlike the past however many decades in the UAW, there's going to be a one member, one vote as part of the anti-corruption effort that the US government did in the UAW. They conducted a referendum of all the membership to see whether they wanted the right to vote on their top officers, which members had never had that right before. Many unions do not have that right. Usually you elect someone to the national convention. This go round, it's going to be every UAW member is going to have the right to vote on who's ever running for the top officer positions. And a number of current top officers, if they're not in jail, have been resigning from the UAW or retiring. So it's on a few months. The convention is in July. But that's in the process of happening. So there's a reform effort within the UAW called Unite All Workers in Democracy, UAWD. And those folks are organizing, those are UAW members, folks in plants in Detroit and across the nation, but also lots of graduate students that have been organized by the UAW and other industries. I think the Michigan State Workers are an UAW local, for example. So all those folks will have the right to vote on sort of the next leadership of the union. And the goal or the hope, or I think the aspiration in their hearts, is that it will be a sea change in terms of how the union has been run. I know probably here in this audience, folks have been very, the UAW has been very important as a union beacon over your time in Michigan or over the years. In the UAW, since at least Ruther has been good on a range of social issues from civil rights forward. But my opinion is it has not been great on contracts and workplace organizing and the issues of the actual auto worker. And so we'll now have to figure out what happens next in the UAW in terms of whether there is a leadership capable of addressing the big three, the transplants, the organizing that needs to go on. But I think this is a good development that members are going to have a direct vote on who runs their union. Yeah, I'll stop there because time is of the essence.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Your bandwidth is a little low, so sometimes when you're answering questions, we're missing parts of your sentences. Might help if you turn your video off when you're speaking, and we can see if that works better. Valerie is wondering if it is largely younger people among the newer people joining and supporting unions. Also, she's wondering if the idea of the death of the American dream might result in more interest in supporting unions. Any thoughts?
I think as far as the death of the American dream, I mean, I think there is messaging that has really caught on, and you hear that in our political discourse. And when candidates are running for something, that we have been misled about this promise of the American dream, that all you have to do is work hard and then stability will follow no matter what your situation is. And I think we all know that that is a very rose-colored way to look at how capitalism and corporations treat their workers. So there certainly could be a good strong strategy with that. And as far as, is it younger people who are joining unions, that is a major effort that is being pushed, is to educate younger folks as to what it means to be in a union, as to what a union represents, and also to address that there are some failures in a lot of public education on just organized labor education. It is not talked about often in the way that it deserves when you consider its impact on the formation of our country and in the modern age. And so, yeah, getting younger people on board is part of the challenge, but membership nationwide is declining. So it's something that needs to be done more.
Yeah, you're not Judy, but your screen says Judy. So go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Say who you are. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is a question for Peter I'm Tom Schramm from the newspaper strike. And I want to know what your take is on the new Teamster leadership, national Teamster leadership that's going to be taking over, and what changes we can expect.
Tom, I certainly remember you from the newspaper strike and the Detroit Sunday Journal, right?
Absolutely, I was a publisher.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, there's an election in the Teamsters every 5 years for the national leadership. And in November of last year, Teamster members voted in a new leadership. James Hoffa Jr. has been president for, I think this will be 24 years. He decided to retire. How's my sound, Tom?
Yeah, it's okay.
Do I need to go off? Okay. He's gone off to retirement. Maybe we'll see him in Troy, Michigan, his home, but we'll see. So anyway, it's a new leadership in the Teamsters, 25 new officers. Many of them, I'd say probably close to half, were vice presidents under Hoffa on the national leadership. It's the slate is led by a guy named Sean O'Brien, who is out of Boston Local 25. He's the new president. He was a vice president under Hoffa for at least 2 terms, if not longer. So it's kind of a coalition slate of folks that had worked with Hoffa over the years, but also folks that have not. I was in a reform caucus in the Teamsters called TDU, Teamsters for a Democratic Union. There's a number of officers, I think 4 or 5 of the 25 that have been longtime TDU members and leaders in their own local unions that are now on that slate. And then there's about, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 that are sort of in the middle between sort of the TDU long-term reformers and the former Hoffa vice presidents. The good thing about this slate is Sean O'Brien consistently over the 2 years that he's been running has said that he will take on United Parcel Service. United Parcel Service is the largest private sector union employer. There's about 300,000 Teamsters, well, probably more than that now, that work at UPS. Their contract is up in August of 2023, so about a year from now. That will be a big test for this new administration because they've made a lot of promises in terms of taking on this company. This company on average has cleared $5 billion each year over the last 10 plus years. So it's not like they're hurting. But the main issue for UPS Teamsters is not so much for the full-timers money and benefits. Those are pretty good. The issue for them is working hours. And for the part-timers, which are about half the workforce, about 150,000, they're only guaranteed a 3-hour shift per day. So it's hard to live on 3 hours unless you're a student, or even then have parents to support you. So anyway, it will be a big test. And if we do well, if O'Brien and the rest of us that fallen behind them for that contract campaign do well, that could have a major impact on inspiring Amazon workers as well as other workers around the country in terms of, oh, look what they were able to do at UPS. Look what they got. Look what their working conditions have changed, et cetera. That could be really important. So we'll know within the next.
Okay, I think we lost you at the end, Peter, but we got the gist of it. Going back to the prior question about younger people joining, or among the newer people joining and supporting unions. So how about your members, and how are you convincing them to sign on to your action?
I honestly don't feel like there was much convincing. We all kind of have the same ideals. So when it was brought up to them, everybody was on board. Even before this incident happened, we would, in a joking, non-joking manner, kind of come into work every day, like, okay, when are we unionizing? So there wasn't really any convincing. The only thing would have been people scared about not getting money, like not being able to afford their bills. But even with that, they were ready to make the jump to improve their workplace, and put that at risk.
Okay, great, thanks. Sherry Wells, you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. A couple things. One of the ways I've been explaining unions to people is that in law school, they taught us that a contract is, to have a valid contract, you need parties of equal bargaining power. And that doesn't mean big corporation and single little employee. That is where the unions come in. And I think that's, one decent way to explain the fact that you can't have a good contract if both people can't bargain equally. The other concern I have with labor, and it doesn't sound like it was exactly the topic today, but we're talking, and as far as the environment goes, we need green jobs. It's one thing to say that we need to get rid of the fossil fuel, but those are jobs for people who need to feed their families. And there needs to be some very strong efforts to get non-fossil fuel jobs so they can still feed their families. I spoke to someone who was a couple of men who were members of the International Labor Union, and they think pipelines are just fine because that's 2 years worth of work. Well, then it's up to those of us who are pro-environment and anti-pipeline to try to get them jobs instead of the ones that are not good. Is there anything any of you can lead me to help push on those things?
Yeah, I want to make sure that we stick to questions. Most of that was the comment, but I do appreciate your question at the end, which may be beyond the scope of today's speakers. But if anybody has something.
I mean, I can say the pipeline issue is certainly, that's a hot topic, that's contentious, and it's not something that there is agreement on all around the board. It depends. It depends what local you're talking to, what international affiliate you're talking to, and they're green jobs. There's no reason why green jobs could not be unionized if that's something for the future, and if that's something that gets people excited and wanting to invest their career and professional development in, then that's a great thing.
Okay, thank you. I do see your hands raised, but I'm going back and forth to get questions as they come in the chat also. So the next question is, Beck, have your friends and family become more union friendly as a result of your experience? And do you see comrades in coffee as part of a general wave of union orientation among younger workers?
Yeah, so as far as my family goes, my dad came from a very strong union family. So he was instantly on board. He understood everything that we were going through. My mom has always been very supportive and understanding. She definitely had the mindset of like, well, what can the union do for you that like you can't just talk to your managers about? But it just took educating her to get her to understand where we were coming from. Besides that, my friends have been so supportive. The community's been so supportive. It's been so surprising to see all of that. And let me read the other question. And yeah, I do see that. I mean, I feel like there's been more initiative among younger workers to demand what they want from their workplace. I can only speak on my experience, but like I've worked so many different fields. I was in a long-term career working for the veterinary industry for 5 years. So I think a lot of us are just seeing that we're working all of these jobs, we're asking for higher wages, for safe working conditions, and it's just not getting through. And a lot of us are coming to the realization that like unions might be the best route. I have a lot of friends that work in cafes in Detroit also, and they've already expressed interest in unionizing. And even coffee shops and other industries across the nation have been reaching out to us. And that's our intent. Of course, we want to unionize Great Lakes Coffee, but we don't want it to stop there. Like, we're not the only ones struggling here.
Great, thank you. Peter Werby?
Hey, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, go
Oh,
ahead.
Okay, good. I've been a union member since 1970. I'm a retiree now, of course. And I found this very informative, but I would hope that we could go beyond that. In other words, there's a lot of us here. Huntington Woods Group has a history of direct action as well as information. And it seems to me that if we got picked out a day down at Great Lakes Coffee, we might be able to make a real impact. Find out a day, for instance, maybe where they get a lot of traffic after a DSO performance and show up there. Because just finding this out and thinking, oh, this is really interesting and hooray for these coffee comrades, is good. But it's what the old IWW used to say is direct action gets you satisfaction. So I wonder if we could actually, even tonight, try to commit to some participation directly in one of these struggles. There's also, and I don't know, I was actually really made unhappy by finding out that Garden Fresh, these nice Ferndale, salsa and chips place is hired one of these union busting places. So thoughts about that? I mean, if we could come out of this with a plan to do some direct action like we do up on Woodward and 10 Mile. And particularly I was thinking Garden Fresh because that's in Ferndale. That's really up by our homes. So, any thoughts?
My question is, wasn't Garden Fresh sold to like Campbell's or something? Wasn't Garden Fresh sold to some larger corporation?
I think it may have been, but they've just, what's the name of that tracking, anti-labor tracking group that somebody mentioned?
Right.
I
Anyways,
thought the owner didn't sell it to Campbell's because of what they were going to do to the employees, but the owner has since died.
right. Anyway,
Well-
beyond that, we did have some discussion before the meeting started, when we were doing our prep session, that there are some suggestions. Beck can talk more about this, that Great Lakes Coffee at the Woodward Corners inside that Meyer store is still operating. And so Beck, you want to go ahead with that?
Yeah, so currently, the Midtown location has been closed since the beginning of January. There is still the Great Lakes location inside Woodward Corner Market in Royal Oak and Rivertown Market on East Jefferson in Detroit. Those businesses are still open, so we've been outside picketing every morning. We have also been contacting stores to get them to stop selling Great Lakes coffee. There are some out in, I'm not too familiar with your area, but there are some in Royal Oak. I have a whole list I could send through, but there's Whistle Stop Diner is still selling Great Lakes coffee, who we've reached out to multiple times, and they have been rather rude, I guess, to us about not supporting. There's a lot of markets that still carry it. Crispelli's is still serving Great Lakes coffee and also servicing their other locations by providing them with pastries. We've reached out to them, and the owners are close friends with the owners of Great Lakes Coffee. So I think as far as direct action, that would be something available.
And Beck, you did talk about this Sunday, right?
Oh yeah, so this Sunday we are having a rally. It's going to be at the Midtown location right on the corner. We're going to have past and present employees speaking, other organizers. We're going to have a picket line going also. And then we're going to be joining the Nain Rouge March that's happening in Detroit to spread awareness. We're going to have flyers we're handing out. And we might have a petition at that time to get the community sign on board, but that's still in the works.
And you said you were also going to have an espresso machine.
And we're having an espresso machine. We're going to be giving free coffee away to the community. We also have our Comrade and Coffee mugs that we will be giving, and some other like random stuff, stickers, stuff like that.
And then there was some mention also about the Crispelli's.
Yeah, so Crispelli's, there's a Royal Oak location, a Berkeley location, and I think there's one more that are still serving Great Lakes coffee, providing them with pastries that they sell at their locations that are remaining open. And they have shown us no support in this. We've reached out to them multiple times. We've done store visits. The rally is also, it's going to be from 10 a.m. to noon on Sunday.
Don?
Okay, my question is for Max. I'd like to know specifically what is in the PRO Act. And let me preface my question by saying that I've been a labor law instructor at Wayne State for a number of years in the past. And there's been a number of issues that I think are extreme, labor law reform issues that are extremely important. One is to ban a right to work under Taft-Hartley. It allows states to pass right to work laws, which Michigan has done, which has been unheard of when, years ago when I was teaching, it would be unheard of to think in the future Michigan would pass a right to work act. It's my understanding that is in the PRO Act. The other thing is I'd like to confirm with you, I think the card check provision is in there. And for years, for even a Clinton Obama administration, they promoted the Employee Right to Join Act, which basically says if a majority of members in a bargaining unit sign a card saying they want to be a member of a union, then that bargaining unit became the exclusive bargaining unit. And there wasn't the need for an election. With an election, you have companies fighting, engaging in unfair labor practices, et cetera, making threats, illegal promises. So I'd like to confirm whether that's in the PRO Act. If it's not, it should be. And finally, I think an extremely important issue that's always been important in labor law reform is to ban permanent replacements in a strike. In the US labor law, we have a distinction without a difference that says that strikers cannot be fired, but they can be permanently replaced if they go on an economic strike. If they go on an unfair labor practice strike, they're given protection. But an economic strike for wages, hours, and working conditions, workers can be permanently replaced. They can't be fired, and there's no distinction. So those are my questions, basically. What's in it? What should be in it? And what do you feel about the permanent replacement issue?
Yeah, so I will start by saying there is a lot in the PRO Act, and I am not someone who is legally literate in a way that it sounds like you probably are. I'm not even going to pretend like I can rattle off every single thing that's in there. It's a huge comprehensive bill. So I could certainly be, there could certainly be things that I forget. I believe your understanding is correct about the right to work and how it would limit right to work. There's also, it would limit a lot of corporations' involvement they can have in union elections, specifically those like misleading tactics and the interference. It would also, man, there's so much. It would limit the, it would have more severe punishments for corporations who do have violations and in ways that are simply right now almost non-existent. And it would also give workers a lot more freedom to dialogue at work and to talk about forming a union and organizing. There is more. I want to check my notes. There's so much in there. I could send a link that has more information on it. I'm not a legislative guy myself. I'm a campaigns person. But yeah, I believe everything you said lines up with my understanding of it as well. But I will say though, the PRO Act, it is the single most comprehensive labor piece of legislation that has been introduced, at least in my lifetime recently. It's something that our sadly belated AFL-CIO national president, Richard Trumka, has really championed and really worked hard for. And we are not, the dream isn't dead by any means at all, but it would be a major step forward. And yeah, and part of why it's so confusing too is that it's not a single one bill. It's not something like the $15 minimum wage that is really easy. It's intervening in one point. The PRO Act is this giant, all-encompassing new universe in which unions are able to operate and interact with their employers and their members in a way that is just so much more friendly for the members and the workers themselves. So yeah, sorry for kind of the incomplete answer there. I'm definitely not the lawyer on our team though, I can say that.
Thank you. Don, did you have a follow-up?
Well, my understanding is this ban on permanent replacements is not in the act. And that's an extremely, extremely important issue. That workers should not be permanently replaced if they go on an economic strike, and they can be. And there's no distinction. There's very little distinction between being permanently replaced or fired. And that has to be remedied. And the AFL-CIO has to get on board with that.
Okay.
I'll put a word in with my boss, see what he can do.
Okay.
I'm gonna tell him that you sent me though. Get ready.
Yeah. I'll give Don some work to do. Are any Michigan politicians especially praiseworthy in terms of their union orientation?
Ooh. I just want to be a little careful with how I talk here because, you know, endorsements in the world of labor is a really big deal. We have certainly a huge list of endorsements in the past that we can pass out. I will just say though that our Michigan senators have been really good on labor issues. Stabenow and Peters have been really good. Our Democratic caucus we send, or our Democratic representation in the House of Representatives has been very cooperative as well. I think it makes life kind of less complicated, less exciting for us in Michigan that our Democrats are relatively all in favor in such a labor historic state. There's a less pushback from that. But I just want to be a little careful with how I talk about that, just because until endorsements are final, I don't want to imply anything.
Peter says that Rashida has been on the Great Lakes Coffee picket line and at rallies. So any other comments, Peter or Beck, on politicians supportive of unions?
I'll agree that Rosita has been to, I think every rally that we've had. She's been on picket lines. She's snuck in, hasn't made a big scene about her being there, and has been like you can tell that she truly supports us and is there for us, which is really reassuring.
Good. Yeah, so if you check your chat, you'll see the information for the rally on Sunday at Woodward and Alexandrine, and about the pickets going on at the Myers at Woodward Corner, and Max's contact information. He put that in the chat also. And Ron Aronson just put a link to laborlab.us, union busters working for Garden Fresh Gourmet. So there's still a lot of discussion going on about Garden Fresh here in the chat also.
And I think Max, Max
sorry.
also put a link to the PRO Act in there.
Yes, and there's a link to, I think.
It's the AFL-CIO's
Oh,
national.
okay, yeah, that's the PRO
Yeah.
Act, right?
It's very, as you can see, there is a lot of information there. There's a lot going on.
Mary, Zoom user?
Regarding politicians, at our last indivisible meeting, when we were talking about unions and union busting, Andy Levin was there, and I did ask him, and said, because he was talking about unions and trying to get people better jobs. So I asked him about union busting, and his comment was, for people that know anything about union busting or are trying to organize and they're not having any luck, to contact him. I realize he's running for office, but this is what he said. So, I mean, I'm just passing that along.
Well, he's been involved with unions for years.
Right, and he's been an
Definitely.
organizer of unions, so.
Right.
Right.
Well, I asked him specifically about the hospitals because I couldn't remember the other, Henry Ford and Beaumont's were listed as far as for trying to break up the unions at both places. And that would affect nursing because we got raises because the unions got raises. Because the nurses still, and a lot of places don't have a union. Some places, nursing too, but you got raises because people that worked there that were in unions got raises.
There's a question here, if there's an online post that we can copy and get people out on Sunday other than just type a notice. Do you have anything, any flyers or Facebook posts or something that you could share, Beck?
Yeah, I do have a flyer. Let me see if I can attach it directly in the chat really quick.
Actually, why don't you email it to Linda and then, or whoever your contact in our group was, and we'll send it out.
Okay, yeah, I can do that.
Okay. If
I
that's
think
okay, Linda.
Peter wanted to address the nurse issue. Did he just say that?
Yeah, Mary, great to see you. I missed the old Clark Park and McCarthy's bar that we shared for many years. But anyway, on the nurses, the University of Michigan hospital nurses, who have the largest, there's 1,500 of them or in that range. Their contract is up in June of this year. So stay tuned for some contract campaigns around that, which will call on the community for support. It'll be primarily in Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti, but I think Detroiters can certainly play a role in this. So that's going to be an important contract and contract fight. And if they do well, that could have reverberations throughout the state as well in terms of non-union nurses. And there's absolutely no reason. Well, the workers may have reasons for why they don't want to join a union, but there's no reason why in the great state of Michigan we shouldn't have most of these major hospitals in unions and the nurses. So, that's a goal of mine for the next 6 months, is that contract and that fight, but that it has reverberations throughout the state.
Well, the DMC did have it, and this is years ago, and I was part of that organization, and we lost. And, this was at Children's. They told us that we didn't know what we were doing. And we only lost by 20 votes, but we lost. So they have tried, but it hasn't gotten anywhere since then.
Well, it's a new generation of the BECKs of the world and a new time. So hopefully it'll work this time.
COVID also may, help. The only good thing about it, but it could help.
All right, so any closing remarks? Because that's it for the questions. Max, Peter, Beck, would you like to make a closing remark as we end this session?
Can I start? I would follow up on Peter Werby's comment that if people can, get Peter Werby to be your organizer or find another organizer, but pick a weekday from 10 to noon and visit that Woodward Corners Meijer. There's always 2 Unite Here staffers there with flyers. Most of the customers are used to seeing them, but it would probably be great for them to see some of their neighbors. And it would be great for some of you to go into the store and talk with Meijer's management about your unhappiness with them subcontracting to Great Lakes Coffee for their cafe. So I would definitely second Peter Werby's effort to try and get Huntington Woods Peace Group to take a day and put a team together and be out there.
That's definitely something we can follow up on. Are there a couple more final comments from our other speakers?
I just want to say thank you for having me on here and for your support. It means a lot to me.
Well, thank you for everything you're doing, Beck. And Max?
Yeah, I want to say thank you as well. This was nice. I really appreciate the questions and getting to talk with folks. I put my contact info. Certainly reach out if you want more. But if I have to plug one thing, I'll say join the picket line with Comrades for Coffee. That's like the biggest labor action happening in Southeast Michigan right now. And it's fun. Picket, the picket line has good energy. It's a good place to attend a rally or just when there's less people there on just a regular day. But yeah, that's my one plug.
Okay, Melanie, do you have anything else or shall I close out this meeting?
Nope, that's it. Close it out.
Okay, good. Well, I want to say thank you to Max and Peter and Beck. This has really been a great presentation. I think having all of you is a great overview. And we're going to do action. We also do action besides speakers. So we're going to take you up on all these suggestions. You'll see us on the picket line. It's something we've done before.